ideas on how to. Oh, that was a little pause in my spiel to let you know that we're recording. I hope you're all okay with that. Do just press continue. If you're uncomfortable, if you could just turn your camera off, then you can be a silent party in this workshop. So back to introducing Corinna, who has helped many community organisations, social enterprises and charities to find funding. And she's worked extensively across the fundraising support world for the likes of the Big Lottery Fund, the EU Rural Development Funding Programme, the Plunkett Foundation, who some of you might know, and she's delivered a series of popular funding workshops for Semble, the parent company of Action Funder, and also for the likes of the Eden Communities Organisation, the Voluntary Sector Training, and Big Lunch Extras. I'm not going to keep listing them because there's such a list of brilliant organisations that Corinna has supported. But perhaps most important of all, she has personal experience in funding community projects and setting up small enterprises. So let's get on with the programme, I think. Let's start talking about budgeting for success. And do bear in mind that at the end of the session today, we'll have an opportunity for questions around Action Funder and any queries that you might have on using the platform. Parina and I will be happy to help with. But first up, over to Corinna.
Thank you, Luna. Before I introduce myself and kick off, we would like to kind of take a little bit the temperature as the sun's coming out and it's getting warmer. And for that, we have prepared a little poll for you. So if the lovely Perrine would launch the poll for us, it'd be lovely if you were to tell us if you know how much money you will need for your project. So you have the choice between no idea, I have a bit of an idea, or I know exactly how much I need. And you just have to kind of click on the whatever choice you're under. So we can see quite a few polls coming in. I'm just trying to think. There's maybe a few more looking to vote, but there's a few votes missing, but generally, Perrine, maybe if you would like to kind of share the polling results now, that would be great. We can see that we have one person in the room who has no idea, and that's absolutely fine and welcome. And if you want to, you can say hello to the group. Overwhelming though, most of you, 85%, have a bit of an idea. So you're in the right place as well. And we have one person who knows exactly how much money they need, and that's brilliant. And maybe that person wants to give us a little wave now as well, if you're on camera, or maybe clap or raise your hand. Because it's always good to have a few experts as my assistants in the room, and we really would like to encourage you to kind of share your experience and expertise with us all today in the chat. So thank you, Perrine, for the poll. If we can just take that down maybe now, and I will proceed to share my screen. Okay, I hope you can see that now. So thank you for Luna and the kind introduction, and to the lovely Action Funder team for bringing us together today. As I said, hello, my name is Corinna Hartwig, and I'm also known as the Funding Doctor. Today, I want to share with you my experience as a volunteer for successful community projects that raised over £95,000. And since working as the Funding Doctor and in grant-making roles for the Big Lottery Fund and a rural European funding program, I have learned a lot on the subject of budgets. So today we're going to talk about simple and realistic budgeting tips that will allow you to secure, hopefully, some funding for an Action Funder. Because if I pulled off a successful community project and learned how to budget, you can too. I just need to move my little screens around here a little bit. Bear with me, thank you. So first, let's bust a myth. Good budgeting is not about being strong in math. It's really about being able to plan well and about taking time to think a project through. And I hope you're pleased and relieved to hear that. So relax for now, no calculator required yet. And let's take a look at the 5 main elements of budgeting that have helped me in the past. So first one is planning for success. We'll establish why you should have a vision and a goal first, so that you can plan for your success of your project. Next, in choosing the right tools, we'll look at which tools will help you and your team to budget. And some of the tools can be very, very simple. Then, under researching your costs, we will dive deeper into how to research and work out your project costs in detail before applying my favorite and very special funding Dr. 3B rule. Finally, you will understand why finalizing your budget has its benefits. A good budget shows the funder that you can be trusted and that you can be trusted to put your plan into action and realize your goal that will help spending the money wisely. So at the end of the day, your budget needs to convince the funder just as much as your passion and your story do. So let's get started with my favorite bit, planning for success. In order to plan for success, think first about what success will look like for you and your project. Make sure that this vision is ambitious and that that all involved in the project can clearly see what the amazing results will be. So for today, if it's okay, I would like us to use the example of a food growing project. So here is a clear vision for it, a green oasis where the community can come together to grow plants, food, take a break, come together and enjoy the natural environment, which we have been enjoying even more, especially in the last year. So once you have defined that vision, it's important to write down a goal. Because if you have a written goal, it's so much easier to share it with others and to commit to it. So here is an example of how you can do this. Just simply write it on a board. That way you're telling the neighborhood that your new project is about positive change and is starting up. It's clear for all to see that it is a growing project, probably around plants, vegetables, and that it wants to improve the local area and will eventually grow from this uninspiring community space into the amazing green oasis that will bring the community together. I would recommend that you start with something small and achievable first. In our example, perhaps start with growing some plants just in this small, very sad looking area. Great. So now it's time to think about a plan that will help you to pull off your first activity, which is a stepping stone in achieving your ambitious idea. So maybe in the chat, a few can maybe help me to kind of think about what are the elements that we need to consider when putting a plan together. Can some of you maybe help me and share a few ideas that we need, so the elements that make up a good plan? So maybe to kickstart, you often warm you up, establish the need. Perfect, brilliant, exactly. Anyone else? Do we need some friends maybe? A team, people power. Yes, absolutely. Brilliant. And one more, maybe?
Need to know a time scale, perhaps?
Time scale, absolutely. Brilliant. Yeah. Okay, so for example, thank you very much for sharing. Here are some typical elements of a simple plan. The need for the project and what it is trying to achieve. And it's great that the need came up first in the chat. Then the activities. where you need to think about communication, you need about resources, you need to think about people, you need to think about rules and regulations, about a timeline, and perhaps your risks, and about the money. And that's why you're here, because you like to attract some funding. So it is really important to have a plan, a roadmap, because without a plan, an idea really just remains a dream. So make sure that your plan is detailed and you can put it into action. For that, for example, for a bit of brainstorming online, you can use the Zoom whiteboard, that some of you might have used. Google Jamboard is brilliant, or also the Miro online whiteboard. And Perrine will maybe share a few links to those in the chat, but you don't have to write it down straight away either. We will share some resources with you after the workshop as well. But make sure your plan is detailed and realistic and can be put into action. So after you've mapped out your different elements of your plan, it's time to decide which tools you will use to budget for your plan. And believe it or not, the easiest to start with is pen and paper, and maybe a rubber too. So there are many different ways in which you can capture or write lists. A mind map, a doodle, but also some of you have interacted in the chat and started to type items in the chat function. That is also a tool, a digital tool that you use. So one very popular document that pulls a list together is a spreadsheet. It allows us to use formulas to calculate amounts, and it can we can use different digital applications for this. So for example, spreadsheets can be created for free in Google Sheets, in LibreOffice, so they're free, and in a paid for application via Microsoft Excel. Then it's important that you store your files somewhere safe, nowadays in the cloud, for example, for free in Google Drive, in Dropbox, and also in OneDrive. So that way you can actually collaborate with them in real time too. And that's something some of you and a lot of us have learned to appreciate since the pandemic started over a year ago. You can use templates or start from scratch, or you could also look around for a cloud-based budgeting software. Don't forget that the mobile phones also have a calculator built in. Your laptop has a calculator built in, and you also have a calculator on your desk. But you can also use budgeting cloud-based software too. So it's important that you choose simple tools that are suitable for remote collaborating and for working in virtual teams, as this is unfortunately likely to stay the new normal for the foreseeable future. So digital collaboration tools are more fun and enjoyable when they are visual, interactive, and easily shareable, so that you always feel connected, just like we do now through Zoom. So what does our spreadsheet need to look like to actually be a budget? And I have adapted this budget that you can see now from an existing template, and we will make this available for you after the webinar. So your budget will always need to show money coming in and money coming out. And that's sometimes called income, money in, and expenditure, money coming out, or expenses. So could you maybe in the chat share a few typical kind of costs, so expenses, money that you have to spend on things, share it in the chat or shout out, however you feel comfortable with. So as I had my mobile phone, I'll kick off. So maybe you need some money to for making phone calls or accessing the internet, advertising, resources, staff salaries, wages, brilliant. Yeah. Materials, yeah, like resources. Brilliant. Some of you might have to hire venues or you might have to hire virtual venues such as Zoom. There's refreshment, publicity that you need to do offline and online, telephone and internet costs, equipment that you might purchase or hire, website and social media costs. Don't forget those. Insurance, any of you? Yeah, we had insurance in the chat, brilliant. Safeguarding training when you work with volunteers, possibly a safe first aid kit, and maybe some sessional worker fees that someone described as wages. So these are kind of the typical costs.
Refreshments.
Sorry, say that again.
Refreshments come under it.
Yes, refreshments, absolutely. Yes, we all need a cup of tea or a little sip of something. So there are also kind of different types of costs. Nobody kind of has put in some really kind of expensive power tools or a really nice shed that we can kind of put our power tools in, but they would be considered as capital costs. So capital costs are one of purchases of greater value. In comparison, running or revenue costs are recurring costs arising from running your group or your organization. So for example, insurance, back office costs like Zoom licenses could be these. And then you also have some direct costs like the refreshments that would be directly linked to your activity. But don't get too sucked into the nitty-gritty for now. Just make sure you get a volunteer on board who's really skilled in bookkeeping and accountancy, I would recommend. So next in our budget, we also need to look at the money coming in. So typical income can be, of course, from grants, and that's why you're here, but from donation, can be in cash, in kind, sponsorships, raffles, fundraising activities that you can do online or in person if social distancing allows us that, membership subscriptions maybe, and if you're cash rich and have a bit of money sitting in a bank, there might also be an income coming from bank interests. That's when you're really big. So another thing that's really important in your budget is don't forget to show a contingency, about 10%, because this also shows you to the funder that you are actually planning ahead for unseen costs and eventualities, which just shows the funder you're really thinking long and hard about your project. And of course, your actual income should always be higher than your actual expenditure for your project to be feasible. If it's not quite there yet, then that's okay. You just have to revisit your costs or maybe find a bit more income. So this particular screenshot also shows us that we've been interacting on this budget in a virtual way, interactively, because we've been using Google Sheets. So that's something I would recommend as well, and you can do it live in virtual teams to work on your spreadsheet. Now we've understand a bit now that there's different types of costs or categories, but we still don't know exactly how much they amount to or who is going to supply these. That's why we have our next step. So we need to research our costs. And I'm just seeing that Hannah had posted a question, what is the standard for how much higher should your income be to your expense? If it's okay, Hannah, we'll take that question again right at the end, and we'll discuss that in a little bit more detail. So back to researching our costs, and maybe a quick recap at this stage because it's lunchtime, and to see if you're still all with me. So far we had a vision, and you also know that you need to have your activity planned. Now you have decided on your budgeting tools, and in our case, we decided on a Google Sheet spreadsheet. and we roughly know what cost categories we're going to have. So now it's really time to do some researching and shopping around and some price comparison for the items and services that we will need in order to craft the perfect budget for our perfect activity. So it's really important, again, to start small with budgeting for our first activity. So, remember, our first activity is growing some plants and some vegetables. So in order to do that, we really need some compost, some seeds, some containers, some tools, some people, some volunteers, and perhaps some skilled professionals. And depending on the ambition of our goal, we will need to think about the quantities next. So let's stick with the compost for now. So how many bags of compost do we need and how much is each bag? So let's research the price for compost for now. And let's assume we need about 2,500 liters of compost for the area that we have earmarked to start with. The next question is, where can we get the compost from? So as you're doing your research by physically going around the garden center, noting down the make, type, or price of the compost, or by shopping online, it's an idea to write down and capture the type of compost and suppliers on a spreadsheet so that you can compare like for like to make an informed decision. You can also do your research at your desk, looking at catalogs that are printed or come through the post, or of course by browsing the internet. And we all got better in the last year to do that too. So soon you'll be discovering that you'll find yourself adding up some prices, and the calculator will now become your new best friend. So comparing multi-purpose compost could look something like this. On Amazon, Miracle Grow comes in a lot of 2 bags at 40 liters each. That makes 80 liters. Now we know we need 2,500 liters. We divide that by 80 liters, which then makes 32. So we need 32 lots at the price of £15.75, which makes a total of £504. Gosh. That's quite a lot. What don't you think? And you might be surprised that these items add up very quickly. But you can also start to ask yourself the question, now, do we need the cheapest compost or do we need the best compost money can buy? And that's where you start to dig and do a bit more research to see if there's better value for money. And I managed to find out that we can actually buy compost in bulk bags. So we can actually buy, there is actually bags out there that contain 900 liters. So again, we know that we need a total of 2,500 liters divided by 900 means that we need 3 of those big bags. And if we time that by the price per bag, that's £264. Now, the difference between the Miracle Grow Rolls Royce of the all-purpose compost compared to our bulk bag buying, we can save ourselves £240. That's amazing. So the planning stage is so important before you're researching your costs, because there's a real danger that you get lost in the small details early on in the process and wasting time and energy at researching costs that are not relevant to your project aims. So researching your costs has another massive advantage. On your sheet, you can safely work out your most ambitious budget without spending real money and risking to run out of it before you actually have put a spade in the ground. So let's now pull our compost costs into our Google spreadsheet. Here I have already filled in the cost for the compost, and that's circled in blue for you. And in the case here, I've just shown that the real price, so the actual price, has been exactly the same as the planned price. So phew, that's quite good. We're on budget. Budgeting also helps you to think about saving some cash by applying my favorite fastest funding tool, the 3B rule, which stands for beg, borrow, and barter. When applying the 3B rule, you basically get your red pen out and go over your detailed budget with it. You will use the red pen to cross out all the luxuries and all the nice to have items and think, can I borrow, can I beg, or can I barter instead of raising hard cash for the items, tools, or skills? The red pen and the 3B rule, beg, borrow, barter, are really your fastest and most important funding tools, along with your calculator, in my opinion. And a little tip from me, compost, by the way, is a byproduct by British Sugar when they're producing sugar. Perhaps they would be happy to donate some for free to a community project. It's worth asking. Your budget will also need to show the income at this point. And in our example, we are going to apply for about £450 from Action Funder. Now, I'd like a little bit of your point of view. Do you think this is a realistic budget to ask for £450 for our project? Any ideas out there? Who says it is a realistic ask to Action Funder?
A bit tight, actually.
Sorry?
I think it's a bit frugal.
Okay. So rather on the careful side of things?
Yes, it is on the
Okay.
careful side, yes.
Okay. Any other opinions?
You're not guaranteed to get the community fundraising.
No, you're not. That's right. But we're a bit limited in time, but that conversation is an interesting one, because for some, £450 might seem a big ask, and for others, more a cautious ask. But by kind of setting yourself a little bit of an income budget, or how much you want to kind of how big the grant needs to be, you are also starting to set yourself a budget for your funding, a funding budget, and that's really, really important as well. So once you work your way through your spreadsheet and thought carefully about your costs, apply the 3B rule, you will come automatically to the final stage of budgeting. You often finalize your budget for a particular activity, project, month or year, or for a particular deadline, such as a funding application deadline. You're lucky with funding, with Action Funder, there aren't any deadlines. But don't forget, it's always progress and work in progress until you're satisfied that everything has been captured and all the costs have been researched and are balancing out. Check again and again that your numbers stack up and make sense. This last but very important step in finalizing your budget is really important, so don't skip it. You will know when your budget is right. It's right when it tells your story in numbers beautifully, and funders like numbers and stories. Oh, hang on 1 second, sorry. Before finishing, let me share with you a bit of last-minute wisdom. Cash is hard to come by and funding is fiercely competitive. This is why it's important to condense your budget and make it realistic and relevant to your objective. You will need to have a succinct budget to apply for funding on Action Funder or to other funders. Finally, 3 more good reasons, just in case you need some more convincing from me. A budget tells your story in money terms and show funders that you mean business and that you have thought your project through. This builds trust through numbers. A budget helps you to stay accountable to the funder and to the supporters and your community. It's specific, transparent, and clear. Finally, a budget will keep your project on track, rein your spending in, and also demonstrate what amazing things you can realize on a shoestring when everybody pulls together. So hopefully you know a little bit more about budgeting, and we have a little bit of time now to take some questions.
Okay, so we're nearly out of time, but I think it would be valuable, Corinna, if you wanted to respond to the questions that have been given in the chat. Then we could put that into the email that we'll send round after the event. We've promised that today's event will be 35 minutes, so I don't want to keep people from their lunch, and we have just 1 minute to go. So what I'm going to do is say a big thanks to Corinna for sharing your knowledge with us today. I always feel in very safe hands taking guidance from the funding doctor. And we'll send a recording of the session round by email following the event. And we'll also include details of how to get in touch with Corinna if you'd like to reach out to her, and do follow her on social at Funding Doctor to keep in the loop with future workshops that she'll be running. Because we're out of time, what I propose to do is stay on for another 5 minutes if you have questions about Action Funder that you want to speak to Perrine or myself about. So we'll stay for another 5 minutes. But for those of you that need to go, thanks so much for joining us today. Look out for more workshops coming soon from Action Funder. So the next one is on the 8th of June, also with Corinna, all about how to measure your impact. So we'll send a link with details to signing up to that session in the follow-up email, along with the recording, along with details of how to get in touch with Corinna. So there we go, managed it in 35 minutes. And for anyone who would like to stay and ask any questions, please do. Perrine and I are here to respond. Yeah, thanks so much for joining. And a huge thank you to Corinna.
Thank you all. Take care, enjoy your lunches, and we will answer your questions after. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
It's a quick 35 minutes, isn't it? It really goes past. Do unmute yourself if you'd like to ask any questions.
I put mine in the chat. Do you want it again now, or will I just wait?
Let's just slide up. What percentage
About
of funding
overheads.
applications should be overheads,
Yeah.
like running the organization? Is that yours, John?
Mhm.
I think that's one for you, Corinna. What percentage of funding applications should be for overheads, like running the whole organization?
It's a bit difficult to say without knowing your organization and whether it's you applying for kind of core funding of running your organization, or whether you are applying for funding for a particular project. Generally, funders like to fund new projects, and that's the case for Action Funder as well, I believe, Lorna. So generally, if you have a reasonable amount of kind of overheads that you need to communicate with your team, and that you need to have to keep them kind of watered, if you like, if it's reasonable and in proportion to the overall ask and what you're trying to achieve, then you are telling the story in numbers, and the funder will then see that.
Would you say that 5% or 10% was too much? You know, this is for the staff time in organizing the project itself, and also contributions toward our electricity costs and so on of running the farmhouse.
It needs to be proportional, and because I don't know the overall project and the organization at the moment, it's really difficult for me to say. So I'd rather not answer in a percentage, because you just need to know a few more details.
I
Sorry,
would say
John.
that if you can cost out those different elements, that's the kind of ideal way to go. If you can give a clear breakdown of cost for kind of running costs of the farmhouse, as you mentioned, and the team time, then bringing it into the overall cost rather than seeing it as kind of an extra overhead that needs to be accounted for, is something that's a kind of useful way to go about it.
Yeah, and obviously the farmhouse is also used for other purposes. So only a proportion of the farmhouse costs would then be pulled into the budget. So, you know, if you're meeting in the farmhouse for, I don't know, 2 hours per week, if you can show the overall cost of the farmhouse and then just a proportion for those 2 hours, then that would be appropriate. Brenda's gone. Anyone else in the room for Action Funder questions?
You're on mute, Lorna.
Thanks, Breen. Always, it's not getting old, is it? Being stuck on mute. If there are any other questions, if anyone with their camera off has any questions, now is your moment. And John, if you have any other questions, do go ahead. Otherwise, we will say goodbye. And thank you so much for joining us.